Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the hostess of the show called The Democratic View. My name is Phyllis Italiano, and today my guest is a very, very special lady. Her name is Jeanne Frankl, and she is the party chair of the East Hampton Democrats and the recipient of the Democratic of the Year award this year in 2011. So, Jeannie, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here, Phyllis. I've heard so many good things about your show.
Well, we enjoy doing it. We'd like to get people to know something about who we are and what we stand for. And I want to start at the beginning with you. I'd like to know something about you. Where were you born? Where were you raised? And all that kind of stuff.
Well, I was born in a good Democratic household in New York City. Well, I was actually raised in Brooklyn, Queens, Connecticut, Manhattan. Those were all my places.
And where did you go to school?
Well, I went to a number of different schools. I started school at PS 150 in Queens. I went to PS 9 in Manhattan. I went to Hunter College High School. Somewhere in between there, I went to a sort of lovely campus school in Weston, Connecticut. So we moved around. I am the children of first-generation parents who were really self-educated. They both dropped out of high school. In those days, when they were young, you could get a job and have a career even if you never finished high school. But the thing that was most important to them in life was that I should get an education, and my brother. So there was very serious educational stuff going on.
Oh, that's wonderful. I mean, my parents also, well, they're American-born, but I don't think they ever even knew what grade I was in. You know, it was just sort of taken for granted that I walked out the door and I went to school and came back. But,
oh, no. From the time I was 5, I was preparing to get a scholarship to college.
Really?
Yep. Although they were first generation, their parents were born here mainly. No, they were born here. Their parents were not born here.
And yes, well, I was 5th grade when I decided I was going to college. And I was the first in my entire extended family.
Really?
To go to college. Yes.
I think I was the second on one side and probably the third on the other.
And something that people may not know about you is that you are a lawyer.
Yes.
And where did you go to law school?
I went to the Yale Law School.
Oh.
I had gone to Pembroke College. My parents didn't know anything about colleges, but they had some friends who had gone to that college. That was the Women's College of Brown. And my degree is from Brown. And I just had the pleasure, for that reason, of interviewing a East Hampton High School student who has applied for early decision to Brown. So that was a very nice thing indeed. And then I applied to the University of Chicago Law School and to the Yale Law School. I got into Yale Law School. I did not get into the University of Chicago Law School. A black young man from Brown got into the University of Chicago Law School. And I mention that because I think as far as law school was concerned, African Americans and women were in just about the same situation as far as expectation of admission was concerned.
Well, that's very interesting because when I was in college at American University in Washington, D.C., I wanted to go to college. I mean, I wanted to go to law school. And somebody said to me, "You'll never get in. You're a woman."
Did you really?
And I said, "Oh."
That's what they said at Pembroke. And I was applying for a scholarship, too.
Wow.
And did get something, a scholarship or a loan or something like that.
And what did you do with your law degree?
I did a lot of different things. I have a wonderful friend who was a very distinguished lawyer, civil rights lawyer, Rhoda Karpatkin, and she once said to me, you know, given how long we live these days, women should always have a second career. And I had a number of different careers. I started out as a law clerk to a federal judge, And then I worked for the Port of New York Authority in their legal department.
Mr. Moses' group.
No, it was an authority like his group, but this is the one that's New
real
York,
one.
New Jersey.
Oh.
That actually, they owned the World Trade Center. And one of the things that I did while I was working at the Port of New York Authority that I remember was to write the legal memo that said they could condemn property for those buildings that ultimately went up and down as the World Trade Center.
Wow.
Strange little thing. I was just a young lawyer, but it had a sort of trajectory.
Wow. So have a real connection to those buildings.
It's kind of chilling.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And then so...
Then I got into what was called a big law firm and worked on antitrust law, which had been my ambition, because when I went to law school, that was what you were supposed to want to do. But after that, I discovered that being involved in public advocacy and work for the public interest was more my métier. I worked in the Lindsay administration in New York City and got involved in advocacy for improving the New York City public schools. And I was the head of an organization that was working on trying to make the schools better for poor and minority kids. So that's basically what I did as a practicing lawyer.
Well, I'm very impressed with that, being an educator who worked for not all of my career, but many of the years of my career. I was in Yonkers Public Schools, which of course has an enormous amount of low-income children, right, especially after the deseg order of 1986, when there was an enormous white flight, and everybody went to Catholic schools, or most of the white people went to Catholic schools, and we were left with African Americans and Latinos, and you know, it was we had to create an enormous amount of different kinds of programs and things and they did it all in a year, by the way, in Yonkers.
They did, really?
They did it in a year.
The Yonkers case, wasn't that the one that Leonard Sand was the judge in the Yonkers case?
You've got a good memory.
I knew him because at some point while I was in law school, I worked in the summer in the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York, and he was my boss. And I always thought he was the most wonderful man. And I was not at all surprised at the kind of brave martial things he did in Yonkers, although not everybody would have approved of those, I guess. But
well, I mean, it certainly was. It actually benefited the school district because they did innovative things with magnet programs, and as I was mentioning to you before, I was a media communications teacher when I went there because they had a closed circuit television channel, and we put shows on, wrote shows. The kids wrote shows, and I taped them, and we put them on, and they were seen all over Yonkers.
So you got a lot of new resources as a result
Absolutely.
of the deseg order?
Absolutely, we really did. It was, I wish we had some of that stuff now in Yonkers. So tell me, how did you get out here?
Oh, I always wanted to come out here. I always wanted to. My fantasy always was that I would live on the ocean. Didn't quite make that, but I was very glad to come out here. I came out here as a single woman and summered here. And then when I met my husband, it turned out that he used to come out here too. And the first thing we did when we got married was to buy a house here, even before we could afford it. I remember staying up all night in the motel we were in and writing down numbers about how we were going to be able to pay for this house. Yes. But that's what we did. And turned out we bought a house right across from where he used to come and stay. We're right across from the McMahons. And he used to come there when he was single and divorced and stay there with his young son. So it was a perfect site for us in Amagansett. And we've been in the same house ever since.
And when did you become involved in the politics? Well, first you must have retired and lived there all full time.
We retired. We enlarged the house a little bit. It's the common story. We had owned the house for 20 years or more than when we retired, and we came out here and have been living here all the time. I didn't get too involved in the politics. I always was a foot soldier in Democratic affairs, so I joined the Democratic Party, and I helped carry petitions and make phone calls at election time. But I was exploring other things that I was trying to do out here. I was involved in a project called Study Circles, in which we tried to bring longtime residents, summer residents, and the new minority residents together to talk about the divisive issues. I was working with Laura Anker on that. It was a wonderful project. Teresa Quigley was in one of the groups. We had a number of different groups that met using a structured guide to talk about what it was that divided the Latinos in the community, the longtime residents, the new residents, the wealthy residents, the retirees. It was fabulous, and it kind of set the stage for how I think about the Democratic Party now. Because what we were trying to explore was the diversity of our community and the possibility of getting it to be one community. This had always interested me as an avid Democrat because I was brought up to think that we were all part of the same long train of immigrants who came to the United States, starting with the Puritans. My family were Jews whose ancestors came from the Ukraine and Poland, but at Thanksgiving, I was a Puritan. And I was just as proud to be at this end of the chain as to have had ancestors at that end of the chain. So this was what we were exploring in the study circles. And this is my vision for how the Democratic Party should work in East Hampton today. So you invited me to give a little speech.
Well, so your goal is one of uniting the community.
Exactly.
It's a wonderful goal.
Exactly.
It's a great goal.
I think it's a feasible goal. This is not exactly a microcosm of the world with all its extreme acute difficulties.
Right.
This is a gorgeous, special place in which, to my mind, all the people have one common love and one common goal that is a unifying factor. So, since they all love this area, we ought to be able to build unity.
With great passion, I might add.
With great passion. We ought to be able to build unity around that, don't you think?
That sounds like a wonderful idea.
So that's who we are and what I'm after.